welcome to another episode of A San Francisco Conservative, the new podcast series featuring yours truly, Tom Martin. I'm a journalist. I've produced stories for CBS News, ABC News, CNN, many other media outlets along the way. I still love asking thought-provoking questions, learning new information, especially when it comes to politics and history and economy. And this is the place for that. And I say that because I'm honored to be joined by our co-host, man of the hour, David Parker. David is the great author of two excellent books I highly recommend, Income and Wealth and A San Francisco Conservative. And David joins us from San Francisco. Hi, David. How are you today?
Hello, Tom.
Great
I was going to ask you, you used to have a beautiful bridge of the San Francisco behind you. What's with this bedroom scene here?
I left it with my heart in San. No,
I thought you left your heart in San Francisco.
Well, as you may know, I worked for many years with Charles Kuralt on the road, and so I am on the road. I am in South Florida today. And,
all right.
And somehow my beautiful photo didn't join me. I'm sorry about that.
That's
we'll
good.
Get back to
all
that.
right.
But anyway, speaking of traveling, this is exactly the topic I want to talk about. I know that you're a native San Franciscan, and you've been there for many, many years, 40 years, plus another 10 as a volunteer in the public schools there, and very active in the real estate scene there in San Francisco. But I think that perhaps your heart to some degree lies in France, in Paris. And as a student of history, I would love to hear your thoughts about the difference between our two cultures, the US and France.
I have an expression. I used it once in France in a household, and everybody was dead silence. I said, the culture of France is culture. The culture of America is business. That sounds pretty crude, but it's really the case. If you're in France, nobody talks business at the dinner table. And to the French, the free market is it's a sign of civilization if you can control that market. We don't want human beings to be subject to freedom. We're a controlled society. And Americans' conversation at a dinner table is not particularly about haute cuisine, or it's not particularly about the latest show at the Louvre. Both countries are kind of talking about what's on TV, but different conversation. And Americans will talk business at a dinner table. What are you doing? What's your next deal? As a perfectly normal cultural thing, because we are a healthy business society, and people come from all over the world because they realize they don't have opportunity where they are, because nobody's talking business. It's even frowned upon in most places of the world. And so that's a pretty interesting thing. I'm interested in France. I went to school. I studied in France, in southern France. I met my wife there. She's French. She didn't speak English for the first 3 years. So, and I keep an apartment there, and I go back and forth, and I go to have my library card. I go there and I go to the library and I read and write. I'm inspired when I'm in Paris, and I'm a night person. So you can get up at 11 o'clock at night. You have to take a number just to get on the sidewalk. There's people everywhere at 11 o'clock at night. The restaurants are open. Man, that's my town.
I love it. I remember, I think my last visit to Paris, maybe about 10 years ago or so, went with my family. We rented an apartment, kind of like Airbnb, just a couple of blocks from Notre Dame. And I remember outside the windows hearing jazz in the streets, which was pretty cool. So I like that. Yeah.
I know musicians because I'm a musician. So I went to the Notre Dame once, and right in front of the line where people are lined up is a bass player from San Francisco, all by himself. He's singing gospel. He says, I don't need you. I don't need anybody. I'm not sharing my tips with anybody. And I got a monopoly on this spot here. I'm making a fortune. He said, more than I ever made in the States, just singing gospel and playing the bass all by myself.
Sounds like a nice lifestyle. Very nice.
Kind of like New Orleans Jazz Festival.
I was just thinking, I spend a lot of time, over the years, my mom is born and raised in New Orleans. And so when you're talking about, before we started rolling, you were saying recently on one of your weekly jazz gigs there in San Francisco, you were joined by some other musicians, not your usual band. And that must have been a fun experience. So
Yeah.
yeah, but as far as France and our country here, I'm sure it has to do with the origin of the country, but I'm sort of surprised a little bit, because when I think of France, I do think about Bastille Day and the French Revolution and breaking free of, the monarchy and whatnot. So I would think that they would appreciate that freedom, but you say they really like having the government in control.
I was in a famous restaurant once, La Coupole, and this is when it was less touristy. I was with a French person, and I said, you know what I love about France, especially Paris? It has all the best of a northern country. It is a successful country. It does manufacture, and it's highly educated, and it has the best of northern culture and has the best of southern culture. Here we are in France. It's midnight. We're sitting down. You can't even get a seat in the restaurant here. It's the best of both. He says, stop. France is also the worst of both. It doesn't, nothing is ever one-sided. The French will just, at a drop of a snap of a finger, will revolt and have a general strike and put the whole country, hospitals, in the middle of the surgery, the lights will go out.
Wow.
Because the people have rights, and we're going to let it know. And when we have a revolution, it's a rite of passage. Every adult has to tell their child, yes, I was in the barricades in France in 1968, and I was in the barricades in 2022. They just love that, and they get all worked up. And let's kill everybody, and let's break all the store windows and break all the car windows. They go nuts for that kind of. I mean, wow. They're crazy.
Yeah. And I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I said culture. France's culture, in America, it's business. But the French do one thing really better than us in terms of culture. They have a policy called laïcité. L-A-I umlaut T-E-X-N. It's a real separation of church and state. No school and no employer may ask somebody what their ethnic background is, what their race is, what their religion is, who their parents are, anything. That's all personal. And in the schools, to unify the country, they teach French history and French culture. They not teach cultures of the French culture is so highly developed, like 5th century Athens is so highly developed. They're not wasting time teaching about the culture for where some of their citizens fled. They're not teaching about African culture. They're not teaching about anything, even German culture. And that's a good lesson for America. Their foreign minister says to French schools, in colleges, don't look at America. Don't look at that woke culture. Don't be excluding people. Don't be talking multicultural. It's a wrong direction. And don't be talking race all the time. All you're doing is getting people antagonized. Every time you bring up the word race, when no one's asking for it. And if somebody's discriminated against, it's up to them. You talk race, you put it right in that person's face, tell them, don't talk to me that way, or whatever you have to do, or have a civil rights demonstration. All that's fine. But the schools should be talking about in America should be talking about British and American, the history of British and American democracy. That's such a great invention. Our Constitution and the Federalist Papers, and all the thought that went into our Constitution, and our history of fighting for democracy, that should be the center of public schools. And all students in the nation should be united, having learned that same core curriculum and reading de Tocqueville and coming away feeling proud of being an American, and not be hearing about our shortcomings, which exist. Let me add this, since I'm talking like crazy now. The list of shortcomings in America compared to our good things is very short. Our good things are really big, and our bad things are really short. In almost every other country in the world, their good things are really short, and their bad things are really big. That's not brought to people's attention. So bad-mouthing America left and right, and maybe rightfully so, but not all the time. Not all the time. Way too much.
Yeah.
We're bringing kids coming home from school crying. I didn't know why people were so bad. San Francisco threw out 3 Board of Education members because San Francisco was going in that direction, telling kids how bad they are as white. And we're going to make 8-year-old kids suffer and cry for what they did 300 years ago.
Amazing.
Bad.
Well,
French say, don't do that. Don't do that kind of stuff.
Yeah. No, I just want to mention for those of you who may be joining us midway here through our discussion, our conversation, this is a San Francisco Conservative, the new podcast series featuring me, Tom Martin, and my dear friend, David Parker, author of Income and Wealth and a San Francisco Conservative. And I know it really is fascinating. I'd love to hear more about how the government, perhaps orchestrates the economy. I certainly see the chaos, the chaos in our own government, but we certainly have free spirit here, entrepreneurial, vision and so on. Do they still have that there, even though the government is more involved in the economy?
The French is such a sophisticated civilization that it does things like we do. They go around the government or in spite of the government, when the government is really controlling. In 2007, Sarkozy was campaigned for presidency and won. And a major part of his campaign was in London, not in France. 300,000 of their entrepreneurial people moved out of France because of the socialism of Mitterrand and the previous presidents. Is you can't operate in France. He says that's unconscionable. He's campaigning in London. He says, you vote for me. And they did. And it's having Joe Biden campaigning in Mexico because all Americans' greatest entrepreneurs and creative people are living in Mexico because they can't operate in the United States. That's how absurd that really is. And I remember after the 2008 financial crisis, I was in Paris. And I'm in the metro. In English, advertisements, huge advertisements in the French subway, come to America, 50,000 jobs. France had a really high unemployment rate after the 2008, like close to 15%. We were as high as maybe 8 or 9. And then we finally dropped down to 3 and France dropped down to 10. It's still like 10. They can't get over it because there's such a controlled economy and their entrepreneurs have a hard time getting around the laws. You can't fire anybody in France, so they don't hire anybody. And if they hire somebody, they hire them as temporary workers. And then they keep hiring as temporary workers. That's not good for a company to have everybody sweating when they're going to be fired the next day. So people leave. And I'm in San Francisco. Because the Silicon Valley is and the information technology and bioengineering is such a part of the future that I take my grandchildren to the playground. I'm in what's called Noe Valley, more or less, or the Castro in San Francisco, even in the Mission. I can't believe all the foreign languages at the playground. All these people are coming to work in that industry, and Silicon Valley says 70% of our employees are foreign born because Americans are not educated well enough to do this kind of work. So we're importing. When Donald Trump was tough on immigration, they were screaming at him. You do that, we have no employees. We can't hire Americans, and the public schools are so bad. So 70%, San Jose Mercury News said that, 70%, 71% are foreign born. I'm at the playground, I can't believe it. Wow. Nobody's speaking English.
Amazing. So I'm curious, following up on what you've just shared, if America is still, we'd like to think of it as a beacon. I mean, it sounds like if 70% of the workers in Silicon Valley are from many other countries, variety of countries, that we're still perhaps that beacon, even though there's certainly all that talk about build a wall and, concern. And it does sometimes sound like there are big numbers of immigrants coming up from Central America, probably.
Yeah.
So for perhaps good reasons, but
we need those immigrants. I mean, we turn our head a little bit when they come across the border because everybody knows we need them. But in the past, the Ken Burns series showed how we kept everybody out. in the 30s and 40s, and I think a few Jews would have been happy to be able to come.
Yes.
But Mexicans, we don't have to go through that process. We just walk in, and so all we're saying is maybe fill out a paper, apply, and we'll probably let you in. Yeah. But we need all those people, and all those people, almost all those people, have a little entrepreneurialism in them. Anybody who's willing to leave their family and their friends and their culture and their language, everything, because they want a chance of better opportunity to succeed, and for their families also, they come. They don't just come for themselves. We want those people.
Yeah. From your time in France, and I know you go over a couple times a year, how is the immigration situation there? I mean, I find it interesting that they don't, people from minority populations don't seek the shelter of special status. They're there to, earn their own way and, make their own mark, and they can speak up.
The French are a little bit like us. They don't really mind they have an Arab population, they have an African population, and all they ask is they don't just stay in their neighborhood and remake their country. That they don't like. Just blend in and be part of the culture and adopt our culture. If you're an Arab woman, you can't come with a hijab so nobody can see your face. Don't do that here. Then don't come here if that's what you want to do. But beyond that, we're not going to ask you anything. Just fit in.
Are there, I guess in closing, we're almost out of time here, but are there certain lessons do you think that we could learn from France? I mean, in terms of our government and our economy and so on?
Certainly not economy, but
yeah.
But the anti-woke, the education minister pointing at the French school system and the nation, don't do that. Don't go America on us. That's completely bad direction. That's pretty good for a civilized country who is free. And in a sense, they are too are kind of woke. I mean, you're not supposed to say politically incorrect stuff in France either. Everybody's conscious. Everybody's conscious, just like we are in that sense.
Yeah, so sounds fascinating. Well, you're making me eager to go back over. It's been a while, so thank you so much. Really fascinating. So,
croissant in the morning, little cafe au lait.
I know. I love the lifestyle.
And you can smoke in a cafe, man. What more do you want?
I appreciate great art, music, and food, architecture, and so on and on. It's really,
they got
really
it,
wonderful.
yeah.
So good. Well, it's been a great conversation, and I just want to thank all of you for joining us. And I encourage you to read David's books. You can purchase Income and Wealth and a San Francisco Conservative by visiting his website, davidparkeressays.com, or by going right to Amazon. And thanks for joining us here on the podcast. Anything you want to add in closing, David?
Well, today I went almost on a rant, I guess. I don't speak so long like I did today, but you got me all what. But my writing is so rich in one subject after another. I give classical, historical references for everything I'm talking about. I don't say nothing is unsubstantiated in my writing.
That's very true. Very true. I love that quality. It's a lot of interesting stories, that buttress the thoughts. So excellent. Okay. Well, thanks for joining us. Great to see you. And we'll look forward to the next time.
All right. Good.